There have been a lot of protests about Israel's war on Gaza happening on the campuses all around the country. And now we've pretty much got a full blown campus intifada on our hands. Let's talk about it. So, there's been some sporadic protests throughout the war, but just in the past few weeks, this has really, really been building. And one of the first big protests was Columbia, and Columbia University sparked off protests that spread across the country to campuses and now spread across the world, which is incredibly inspiring to see and just very, very heartening. Now, last night the cops raided Columbia again, and they have stormed in and are now going to occupy the campus for 2 weeks. So this campus is now like basically under like a militaristic occupation until after graduation. So that's wild. Um, you know, college campuses have always been a, you know, place where protests have really thrived, and our traditions of free speech are really, really valued, and everybody has the right to gather, to speak their minds, and to let their voice be heard in a democracy. Well, unless you're criticizing Israel, all bets are off. So, Columbia has a really rich history with student protests too. In the Vietnam War era, they had some protests there. They occupied a building there called Hamilton Hall, and they occupied that same building again this week, and they renamed it Hind Hall in honor of the 6-year-old Palestinian girl, Hind Rajab, who was trying to evacuate in Gaza with her family in a car when they were fired on by Israeli tanks. And she then made that famous 911 call for help, surrounded by the bodies of her dead family members, trapped in this car, and her rescuers were trying to get to her. They had to go through this whole long process to clear that rescue route with the IDF, who then authorized an ambulance to come. And then they bombed the ambulance on purpose, just like they did World Central Kitchen. And they attacked the car again and killed little 6-year-old Hind. And those tapes of that scared little 6-year-old in a car surrounded by her dead family and surrounded by IDF tanks is going to be one of those just historic moments where things started to shift and people really started to see what was going on. So they named the hall Hind Hall after Hind. And on April 30th, 1968, the police were called in to drag out all the protesters and arrest them. And here we are, 56 years to the day, and the NYPD storms in again, arrests everybody. Students were thrown downstairs and then denied medical care. One kid was unconscious. They wouldn't let first responders reach him. It was brutal. It was a disaster. And the really ironic thing about this is that Columbia prides itself on its student activism. And they have a page on their website about what happened in 1968 with the Vietnam War protesters. And now, then they wanted their skulls cracked. Now they're like, oh, look at these great protesters that were doing what was right. And yet here we are once again. They're doing the same thing. Like Columbia literally teaches a class about how they failed their student activists in 1968, and they've learned nothing. It's all PR stunt. But hey, it's gonna hurt their little brand that they sell, I suppose. And the other really notable protest event that happened last night was at UCLA, and they had a peaceful solidarity encampment there of students. And last night it was stormed by a pro-Israel mob with Israeli flags, weapons, pepper spray, and they just like went in and brutalized these peaceful protesters. And the cops were there and just let it all happen. So any of this nonsense about the cops, we need to keep our students safe from these dangerous protesters. Yeah, no, we're protecting Israel. Screw our kids. It's maddening. It's just the levels of hypocrisy that you just bang up on again and again and again when you talk about these situations. But yeah, so that was the UCLA thing. And then one piece of good news. Most of these colleges have handled it totally wrong. Like, let's say I was a Zionist administrator. The right thing to do would just be let these people have their little protest and ignore them. It'll go away, right? Graduation's almost here. Instead, they like freak out and call in the cops, and now it's spread across the world. So, thanks for being idiots, guys. Anyway, there was someone who handled it the right way, and that would be Brown University. Brown University students were demanding that their university divest from Israel, and they have agreed to have a vote on that. No skulls cracked. Look, let's just talk about what the people are demanding, because these are right and just demands. These students are standing up to a genocide, and they're on the right side of history, and I'm really proud of them. And let's see, what else did I want to tell you about? Well, those are the two big ones from last night, but just a little bit about the whole idea of a peaceful protest. And, it's always shocking to folks to see students just being attacked by the police like this. In some cases, the National Guard was called out in Texas. Photos of snipers up on the roof at one of the universities in Ohio. I forget which one. But, I mean, again, that goes to the Vietnam War. Like, 4 dead in Ohio, right? Well, one of the things that happens if you have a successful peaceful protest generally is that the authorities freak out and crack skulls and make themselves look like the monsters they are. And, in that case, I guess mission accomplished, right? Anyway, those are the updates from what just happened on the protest. There's a lot going on, but ultimately, let's keep the focus on Gaza. That's why these kids are out there putting themselves on the line, and we can't let ourselves get distracted too much. But it is really encouraging to see this. All these, it gives me faith in the future to see the younger generation just like really standing out and putting themselves on the line to do the right thing. Much love and free Palestine, y'all.